A Little Respect with Andy Bell. The story of dance music through the eyes of the LGBTQ community.
Dance music is such an inclusive form of music.
The music really unifies so many people from so many different backgrounds.
Wait just a minute, mister. Looks so good.
My eyes, my ears, everything is wide open to the experience.
I made no promises, I can't do golden rings.
The bass was through your chest, the atmosphere was electric.
Music all night long.
It was a place unlike a lot of other clubs.
A Little Respect with Andy Bell. Virgin Radio Pride.
Hi, I'm Andy Bell. You might know me as one half of Erasure, and this is A Little Respect on Virgin Radio, the story of dance music through the eyes of the LGBTQ community. Over the next 3 episodes, we're going to be celebrating the incredible legacy that queer culture and gay people have had on the music that's made us dance for the last 50 years.
Nightclubbing as a concept is a gay concept. That's where it started, you know. The idea of fantasy, being a star, out on the dance floor, you know, fulfilling your dreams, just for a night, being who you want to be, expressing yourself, you know, all that kind of stuff.
That's Claire Morgan-Jones from DJ Magazine in a 1997 Channel 4 documentary called Trade, The All-Night Bender, discussing London's nightlife. But we've got a long way to go before we reach the turn of the millennium. Our story starts in the 1970s when disco ruled the dance floor. Journalist Vince Aletti wrote the first article on disco for Rolling Stone magazine, describing the scene as a thriving underground of juice bars, after-hours clubs, private lofts open on weekends to members only, and populated by a hardcore dance crowd, blacks, Latins and gays. It sounds like a fun place to begin our journey.
Turn the beat around, love to hear percussion. Turn it upside down, love to hear percussion. Love to hear it blow, horns just sound pretty. Your violins keep moving to the nitty-gritty. But when you hear the scratch of the guitar scratching, then you know that rhythm carries all the action. Whoa. Turn the beat around, turn it around. Love to hear percussion. Yeah. Turn it upside down. Hey. Percussion. My. Love to hear it. Got to hear it. Turn the beat around. Love to hear percussion. Move your feet when you feel the beat. Yeah. Turn it upside down. Love to hear percussion. Whoa. Love to hear it.
With rainbow flags flying higher and more proud than ever before in 2021, the only thing missing from the celebrations in the early weeks of our most recent Pride Month was a global dance floor to truly unify us all. After all, the gay community was almost universally liberated in nightclubs and private parties more than 50 years ago. From Saturday Night Fever and roller discos to the clubs of Soho and Manchester, the glamour of Studio 54 and the mystique of the Paradise Garage, we'll find out about the history of house music, the electronic pioneers of the 80s, hard dance of the 90s, right up to today's inclusive and exciting dance floors. Our community changed the course of not just dance music, but clubs, culture and nightlife forever. In the early 70s, David Mancuso hosted legendary disco parties at the Loft in New York, but it was coming off the back of an American society where homophobia was the norm and gay people were demonized.
They tell youngsters that it's smart, it's thrilling, it provides kicks to be a homosexual, a sadist, and every other kind of deviant. Psychiatrists believe that prolonged exposure of even the normal male adult, though he may not be aware of its true nature, will nevertheless pervert.
What you think, what you feel now, what you know to be real. What you find.
The decision is always yours, and your whole future may depend on making the right one. So no matter where you meet a stranger, be careful if they are too friendly, if they try to win your confidence too quickly, and if they become overly personal. One never knows when the homosexual is about. He may appear normal, and it may be too late when you discover he is mentally ill. So keep with your group, and don't go off alone with strangers unless you have the permission of your parent or teacher.
I think disco has always gone hand in hand with the gay scene.
That's Paul Morell, DJ, producer, remixer and resident DJ at XXL, one of the UK's biggest gay nights.
Obviously right back to people like Larry Levan, Paradise Garage, Patrick Cowley and all his remixes of the huge disco tracks from back in the 70s, you know, Donna Summer, Sylvester, all those tracks. I mean, they're still played today quite often. If I drop I Feel Love at XXL, the crowd goes mental. Or if I play Sylvester's You Make Me Feel My Real, which again is a Patrick Cowley kind of influenced production from the 70s. Those records are really timeless because they use a lot of the production techniques that are still prevalent today, and I think you can't get away from the impact and influence those producers had in sort of 76, 77, 78.
Very much from the very beginning. I mean, you have artists like Sylvester, Carl Bean with I Was Born This Way, even though some were closeted like Luther Vandross and others, they were still very much an early part of that scene.
Grammy award-winning producer and DJ Roger Sanchez.
Now, in terms of the actual scene itself, the gay clubs are where, you know, disco and house music really first made their forays and was embraced. You know, you had clubs like the Saint in New York. The contribution to the scene is really immeasurable.
In 1977, The Warehouse opened in Chicago. Saturday Night Fever was released at the cinema, and Steve Rubell and Ian Schrager opened a club in a former radio and TV studio that would go on to become one of the most famous and flamboyant venues on planet Earth. The dance floor of Studio 54 in Manhattan was a who's who of the world's best musicians, artists, designers and celebrities, from Salvador Dali and Andy Warhol to Mick Jagger, Elton John, Grace Jones, Debbie Harry, Everyone who was anyone wanted to be there. Steve Swindles is a singer, songwriter, club promoter and journalist who played in the bands Hawkwind and Pilot, I never knew that, and put on some of London's most successful early gay nights. But back in the late 70s, he was one of the lucky few who made it through the notoriously difficult doors of Studio 54.
The DJ box was on a bridge that used to come out over the dance floor in Studio 54 with loads of people dancing up there as well. And it came all the way across to the balcony. And then people could get on to the DJ bridge at the balcony. It was really exciting. But what people don't know, and what's never been really documented, for some reason, I don't know why, the basement was an absolute heaving mass of bodies. It was a mass orgy, mostly gay. It was like, wow, like Roman decadence, you know, it was incredible. I've never seen anything like it.
By July 1979, the tide was turning on disco. Anti-disco fans came together during a baseball game in Chicago to protest against the movement. A crate filled with the disco records was blown up on the field, with the pitch so damaged by the explosion that the fans of the White Sox were required to forfeit the game. The scenes of violence were a major backlash from rock music fans, with many slices of the debris from the records thrown like flying discs from the stands. Coined as Disco Demolition Night, the movement, which was eventually dispersed by riot police, was attributed as a major factor in the overall decline of disco, with many labelling the event as an expression of racism and homophobia.
WBBM News Time, 9:18. Time for Brad Palmer, Sport.
Many of the fans are scattering off the field now when they sight the police. And many SOC security members are joining the police, which are now about 40 or 50, and they're slowly, now rapidly walking out the center field where the fire is burning. The fans are now streaming off the field in great numbers, and I doubt if very few will be left to confront the police as they come in helmets and nightstick gear.
That was the scene between games of a doubleheader at Comiskey Park last night as White Sox owner Bill Veeck went a promotion too far. It was billed as Disco Demolition Night. A rock disc jockey came up with the idea of blowing up disco records as part of his self-serving campaign against disco, and the White Sox went along by admitting anybody bringing a disco record for 98 cents.
As disco began to fade, another New York club was taking a less extravagant and more focused stance. The Paradise Garage on 84 King Street didn't serve food and drink, but it was open to the general public. Steve Swindles again.
It was my first time in New York, and it was 1979. I had made some demos, partly funded by a friend of mine who was an Italian count, and they were really good. He said, well, I'm going to New York, you know. Would you like to come? I'll pay. He was very rich. The thing is that he got in New York, he was VIP everywhere. He got swished through ropes, you know, so it was a perfect person to go with, because getting into Paradise Garage wasn't easy. Virtually impossible to get into Studio 54, but we were swished straight away. So my first visit to Paradise Garage is what you really noted, because it was in an old parking garage, a sort of Art Deco building, which was quite sort of industrial chic. It was huge, vast, and you entered via a ramp, which was lined with light bulbs, very, very bright. But, you know, absolutely huge impression. You understand, if you go to Ministry of Sound, they basically tried to copy the whole vibe with the ramp and the giant dance floor and the huge sound system, which was white. And it just hit you in the chest. You know, it was incredible. The DJ booth was high up and inaccessible to anyone. You know, you couldn't go up there. It was heavily guarded, really. There was heavy security. What struck me immediately was we're talking 79, completely multiracial. And there were lots of straight people. It was essentially a gay club that welcomed everyone. And they had a quieter room showing cinema and porn with what Americans call bleachers, you know, the raked seating. You see it on the side of a football field or something. Very simple, very minimalist, but the atmosphere was absolutely electric.
I'm walking through life in nature's disguise. Yeah. You laugh at me and you criticize. Yeah. 'Cause I'm happy, carefree, and gay. Yes, I'm gay. Ain't no fault, it's a fact. I was born this way. Yeah. Now I won't touch you. Don't you judge me. We're on the way. Nature made us to be. I'm happy. I'm carefree. And I'm gay. I was born this way. I'm happy. I'm carefree. And I'm gay. I was born this way. I'm happy. I'm carefree. And I'm gay. I was born this way. I'm happy. I'm carefree. And I'm gay. Yeah. You call me strange 'cause you don't understand. No. God's role for me in life's overall plan. Yeah. I've learned to hold my head up high, not in scorn nor disgrace. Doing my thing individually, twine with this human race. Now I won't judge you, hey, don't you judge me. We're on the way. Nature made us to be. I'm happy, I'm carefree, and I'm gay. I was born this way. I'm happy, I'm carefree, and I'm gay. I was born this way.
A Little Respect with Andy Bell. Virgin Radio Pride.
The unique and eclectic styles of music played at the Paradise Garage have fallen into the modern lexicon, with garage music deriving its name from the tracks played by the resident DJ, the legendary Larry Levan.
He had this enormous mystique about him. He used to do lots of remixes as well. And I was hanging out at the Ministry, and Justin brought this really good-looking black guy over. He said, "This is Larry Levan, and I'd like you to meet Steve, who's a bit of a legend in Clubland here." And Larry and I just locked eyes and basically fell in love. He's a beautiful-looking guy. And we just spent hours chatting, hanging out in the Ministry, hours and hours and hours. And I was telling him about my music and everything, and he was such a lovely guy. All this thing, I mean, he certainly wasn't, a heroin junkie. Absolutely not. We just fell in love. And he said, "Oh man, I would so like to stay around with, hang out with you, but I've got to go to Paris like now." It was like 6 a.m. by then. He walked down the balcony backwards, shouting at me, "Somebody understands me! Somebody gets me!" And it was just one of those wonderful moments. And then I thought, oh my God, I've just fallen in love with this wonderful guy, and he really likes me, and something great's going to happen. And then he died. in New York a few months later. We were all planning to work together, making some really, I can only imagine. It's so sad, but to have that lovely memory of him walking backwards and shouting with this huge grin on his face, it was just great.
Love can't turn around. Love can't turn around.
Now this is how it started. My dreams are broken-hearted, yet I want you, baby. We'll never be the same, 'cause you play those silly games, and yet I want you, girl. They say we were an item. My thoughts, I try and hide them, yet I need you. But when we get down to it, I just love the way you do it, and I love you. Love can't turn around.
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 I thought you were my lover, but you left me for another. Thought I knew you. Don't read it in your letters. Don't you make me feel any better, 'cause it's not true. Now in my secret visions, forget about decisions, 'cause I want you. I've got to have you near me. Girl, I wonder, do you hear me? 'Cause I need you. Love can't turn around.
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 Larry Levan used to play a lot of these tracks at the Paradise Garage. And you used to hear them at the Loft and a couple of the other clubs in New York that I was going to.
Roger Sanchez.
So really kind of Paradise Garage was a real cementing point for me, and kind of being in, I remember walking up that long ramp to where the pay booth was and going inside, and they were kind of like the locker area where you could put your locked stuff away, and then you go into the dance floor. Friends of mine were core members of Paradise Garage. To be a core member, you either had to be gay or had to be introduced by, kind of vouch for somebody in the gay community, because Saturday was the gay nights, and I'd been going both to Friday nights and Saturday nights, depending on what the fact that I'm not gay really didn't make a difference, basically because I was right in the middle of that music scene and the creativity. I remember one particular Friday night, I walked in, and the first track I was listening to was Frankie Knuckles' Baby Wants to Ride. It just sounded insane in that place. And I think that really cemented for me where I said, okay, this is a sound that really resonates with me.
Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take.
Jamie, it's time to tell my people the truth. It's time to tell them the revelation of my second coming. Have them understand, relate. Now ride me, baby.
She took me to the sky. She took me for love, stripped me bare and watched me for love. She made me scream deep for love. Baby, rise for love. Relate.
Some of the major heroes in the scene would be like Junior Vasquez, Danny Tenaglia, Derek Carter, Ted Patterson, Frankie Knuckles, major proponents of house music that come from the LGBTQ community.
With Levan flying high in the Big Apple, securing a decade-long residency at the Paradise Garage, which was later described as the prototype of the modern dance club, Knuckles made the move to Chicago, where his old friend Robert Williams was opening what became the nightclub called The Warehouse. When the club opened in Chicago in 1977, Knuckles was invited to play on a regular basis, which enabled him to hone his skills and style, giving birth to house music, a style named after a shortened version of Warehouse. Here, Frankie Knuckles talking to Defected Records boss Simon Dunmore in a very special one-on-one interview in 2011 that you can find on the Defected YouTube channel.
After I left Better Days, I worked at Continental Bass for like about 5 years with Larry. And I went there as Larry's light man because Larry got the residency. And so he invited me to come and do lights for him. And back in the day, that's how you got a job. If you're gonna work as a DJ, if you can get a job as a light man, then you can ultimately become a DJ one day because you're right there with the music all the time anyway. And sooner or later, the DJ's gonna have to go to the bathroom and he might not make it back in time. So you might have to change that record and you better know how to do it. So that's pretty much how it happened.
He was very sweet, very loving, and everybody loved Frankie. He was also like a mentor type personality, so he always wanted to help somebody out. I think a lot of people learned from him, and he was just a sweetheart and just talented, you know?
Frankie Knuckles was probably not only one of my heroes in terms of music and DJing, but also one of my very good friends. And it was an interesting one for me. I moved into a building on 19th Street in Chelsea in Manhattan. Frankie Knuckles lived on the 10th floor. So we used to really, it was a funny one because he'd be like, okay, I'm gonna come down and borrow a cup of sugar. And I'd tell him, Frankie, you've got enough sugar for both of us. You don't need any more sugar. And he was just such a sweet individual. And I mean, during those days, you had Honey Dijon coming through, Rob Fernandez, who was the major promoter in New York, who passed away a few years ago. So many other people coming through the building who would kind of stop in and then go upstairs to see Frankie. And one of the things that I have to say about him is that he was always an amazing gentleman, very, very discernible taste in art and music, and was really very kind. So that's one of the things I always remember about Frank. He was an incredibly kind soul.
So-called house music was first made in the creators' houses, but it was also performed at clubs called the Warehouse and Powerhouse. However it got its name, it's one of the hottest things going, and as Jay Levine reports, it may only be a matter of time before house musicians become heroes in their own home.
I started catching these records coming from Chicago, and then I started getting all these tracks, international tracks, you know, Adonis, No Way Back, Marshall Jefferson, Jungle Ones. It was just a vibe.
You're listening to A Little Respect on Virgin with me, Andy Bell. The story of how queer culture and gay people created and influenced dance music over the last 50 years. Knuckles was so popular that the Warehouse, initially a members-only club for largely black gay men, began attracting straighter, whiter crowds, leading its owner, Robert Williams, to eschew his own membership. By this point, gay culture was starting to become more open, with mainstream media, and back in the UK, the gay scene was also expanding, with more and more clubs opening across the country, especially in London. Steve Swindles ran two of London's most popular gay nights in the Lift and Jungle. I went to all of those places.
The Lift was my first club night because I wanted to hear some decent black music in a club. And I wanted to find a gay black DJ. I knew the one DJ I wanted already, and he was white, a white gay guy, but that's cool, one white, one black. But I wanted a genuinely gay black man who was a really good DJ. And then I heard, before I opened, I had the idea in my head and I had the name, The Lift. But before it opened, someone I knew, a young black gay guy, said, look, you've got to go to the house party. Really? He said, yeah, there's a whole underground black gay scene in people's flats. And people pay £1 to get in and £1 for a beer and stuff. And they're amazing. So I started going to these and never experienced any racism or anything. It was just good vibes. And it soon transpired that the most popular DJ by far was called Mel. And so I asked him to be that DJ for the lift, and he was an extraordinarily good DJ.
Much like Studio 54 in New York a decade before, London's hottest gay nights were also attracting the stars.
Jungle was absolutely celeb-studded, and all the big gay names were there. Boy George and Culture Club, the Sex Pistols were regulars, Sade was there every week, Misha Paris was there every week, Bananarama. It was just like a wash with celebs. Jimmy Somerville, Bronski Beat.
More evidence of how gay culture was slowly creeping into mainstream culture was how pop music and the charts were reflecting what was happening on the dance floors.
You had the Vogue dance movement, which then was popularized by artists like Madonna, but that was very much a gay New York kind of community. Basically, you know, the straight community had breakdancing and battles, and that became like the kind of the gay community dance floor battles. It was really interesting to see how that then became popularized and commercialized across so many different scenes and genres.
Voguing, when we went to the clubs, there was no VIP. There really wasn't any bars back then.
That's Crystal Waters, whose huge hit, Gypsy Woman, we'll get to later in the series.
It was just people who danced. They brought the baby powder and you had a scarf or a towel to wipe off the sweat. And that was the whole scene. There was always voguing, there were battles, there would be circles. My dancers that I had, one of them, Kevin Milan, he was a really good voguer. He was one of the main ones. So I got to go to a lot of balls. I mean, Madonna was there, drag queens and everything. It was very underground, but it was very cool.
Escape.
talking of fashion, it would be remiss not to mention the whole new romantic scene of the 80s, and was born out of the Blitz Club in London's Covent Garden. Although not a gay club, its founder, Steve Strange, and the cloakroom attendant, Boy George, and the so-called Blitz kids would go on to change music and fashion with their own unique looks and sounds. The whole scene was brilliantly documented in the 2005 Channel 4 documentary, The Blitz Kids, Whatever Happened to the Gender Benders, which is well worth a watch.
I mean, he was the first new romantic star, and he jokes about the fact that Boy George has never forgiven him for getting Fade to Grey out and having a huge hit with it.
To be honest with you, when Steve first released that record, I hated it. I was just so bitter and jealous. I just couldn't believe that he'd had a hit. And I think the worst thing was when I went home to Woolwich, they'd thrown this kind of new romantic party in the town hall, and they were playing Fade to Grey, and people were going on about it. At the time, it was like, why him and not me? It was just, everybody wanted to be famous, and the idea of him being famous before me was unbearable, but I got over it. In fact, I was more famous.
The success of Visage and Steve Strange spurred on Boy George to become a huge star himself, and his band, Culture Club, had some of the biggest hits of the 80s. His controversial first appearance on Top of the Pops back in 1982 was the first time a cross-dressing performer had appeared on mainstream tea time TV. But it wasn't all progress in the 80s, and as the decade progressed, a dark cloud hung over and took hold of the scene.
Scientists at the National Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta today released the results of a study which shows that the lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer. Robert Bazell now in Atlanta.
Bobby Campbell of San Francisco and Billy Walker of New York both suffer from a mysterious newly discovered disease which affects mostly homosexual men, but has also been found in heterosexual men and women.
The AIDS crisis completely changed things. Segregation of gay and straight nightlife became more sharp from 88 onwards, when the epidemic was at its peak and anti-gay legislation was being passed by the Conservative government, most notably Section 28 of the Local Government Act.
It was our pandemic, and I lost 50 friends. But what AIDS did was galvanized London's creative community. We were determined to party and also to campaign and raise consciousness. So the 80s were incredible for the way that people were galvanized and brought together, and the music was wonderful.
The virus was sweeping through the gay community, so going out became a statement of the celebration of life in all its fragility and glory.
Sister Bliss.
So these places were really, really, really important. You'd still be spat at or even hit or abused if you were gay or walking down the street with your partner holding hands or whatever. So to come somewhere where a person, regardless of sexuality, gender, race, what they were wearing, could just come and have the best time.
LGBT influence in music, it comes from many angles, not just ghetto. I mean, George Michael, incredible talent. Boy George, love him or hate him, incredible talent. Bronski Beat were incredibly influential. Must have made it easier for any kid who thought they may be gay. I mean, everything changed in the 80s, basically.
I'd say dance music wouldn't be what it is today without our community's contribution.
That's producer and DJ Paul Masterson, most famous for his dance anthems under the name Yomanda.
From a creative point, there's many gay artists that have struggled with many issues in their lives, trials and tribulations, and then they turn them into dance anthems. A good example would be the Communards and Jimmy Somerville, the Pet Shop Boys, where their songs have given us joy, empowerment and acceptance.
It was also heavily influenced by English electronic music. There was this cross-germination going on between English electronic and New York garage, you know. So the 80s, on one hand, you had the darkness of the AIDS pandemic, and on the other, you had Clubland being entirely joyful.
Respect with Andy Bell. The story of dance music through the eyes of the LGBTQ community. Virgin Radio Pride.
Sometimes I feel I've got to run away. I've got to get away from the pain you drive into the heart of me. The love we share seems to go nowhere, and I've lost my light. For I toss and turn, I can't sleep at night. Once I ran to you, now I run from you. This tainted love you've given, I give you all a boy could give you. Take my tears and that's not nearly all. Tainted love, tainted love. Now I know I've got to run away. I've got to get away. You don't really want any more from me to make things right. You need someone to hold you tight, and you think love is to pray, but I'm sorry, I don't pray that way. Once I ran to you, now I run from you. This tainted love you've given, I give you all a boy could give you. Take my tears and that's not nearly all. Tainted love.
I'm Andy Bell, and you've been listening to A Little Respect, the story of dance music through the eyes of the LGBTQ community. Over the last hour, we've travelled from the decadent dance floors of the 1970s New York to gender-bending London clubs of the 1980s, through love, loss, triumph and tragedy. The queer community revolutionised culture and music and changed the very fabric of our society as a force for good. Join us next time as we wave goodbye to the 80s and experience the second summer of love, the rise of rave, and how gay clubbing became the blueprint for many of the following superclubs. The 90s are coming. But before they do, we couldn't finish without playing you this one. And thanks for listening. See you next time.
I try to discover a little something to make me sweeter. Oh baby, refrain from breaking my heart. I'm so in love with you. I'll be forever blue. That you give me no reason why you make me work so hard. That you
Little Respect was produced for Virgin Radio UK by This Is Distorted. It was written and produced by Andy Durant, with additional writing, research and interviews by Ryan Winders and Jake Gable.
A Little Respect with Andy Bell. Virgin Radio Pride.